Welcome back to Product Therapy. Today, I'm happy to be joined by Jon Moore, a partner at SVPG, to discuss product visions. Have you ever wondered why product visions matter? What truly makes a vision inspiring and impactful? Who should be responsible for one? And how to determine the right scope and level of detail? In this episode, we discuss product visions. We give you full, practical insights on how to build a vision that truly guides and inspired your team. Jon, welcome to Product Therapy.
Thank you, Christian. It is always good to see you.
Wonderful. Well, I know it's a beautiful day out where you are in the UK, but we're going to talk visions today. And I want to really start with just a basic definition of a product vision. And particularly, I want to differentiate it from some of these other artifacts that are out there. Like people often call, what's the difference between my company mission and the product vision? Why is it called a product vision? And how does that differ from like a roadmap? So maybe help us just start with how you define a product vision.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of confusion out there. And I think some of the confusion is because, people reference a lot of the kind of tech startups where the vision and the mission, can kind of be one and the same thing, right? I'm thinking Microsoft in the early days put a computer on in every home, on every desk. That's kind of mission and vision together. So that's not most companies, right? For most companies, the mission of the company is the why we exist. Like one of the best missions, I love this mission, is Patagonia. We are in business to save our planet, right? What a great mission, right? It doesn't tell us anything about how we're going to do that, though. So think of the mission as the why we exist, right? The product vision is really going to start to tell us what we're going to do to bring that mission to life. That's the point. So there are many different ways of, saving our home planet. What are we going to do over the next 3 to 5 years that speaks to the mission? There's 1,000 different ways of doing it, right? So think of the mission as the why, the vision as the what, and then of course if we have time to get to product strategy, that's the how. How are we going to bring this vision to life? And that's kind of how I think about it.
Your mission doesn't change. It's kind of why you exist. So it's not something that you're maybe planning to achieve in the next 50 years or 100 years, or you look at, I think Google is like organize the world's information. You're like, good luck with that. It's kind of like an endless journey or bring happiness to all. So you're kind of differentiating the mission from the vision with the mission is a reason for being, your purpose of your company. It's something that you're not planning to change anytime soon. This is probably what you see on company walls. They kind of stick it up everywhere, in that way. While your vision, you're calling out two things. It's kind of the what you're going to do to help that mission, but you also put a time horizon on it. Is that also a key aspect here?
It is a key aspect. And I think it's an interesting one when it comes to, this brick wall that has hit us in terms of Gen AI, because I think that is changing things. Maybe we can touch on that. But look, let's go back to your Google example. Organize the world's information. That is a great mission. It's a crappy vision, right? Because there are a million ways to do it. So unless we add some muscle to the bones of that, then what are our teams going to do? They're going to go in 1,000 different ways. So the point of a vision is to bring us together. It's to give us, sometimes companies call it North Star. That's just fine, right? It is going to be the start of the point that we make some decisions. That's really the point of a vision. And yeah, you're right. Normally, historically, we're thinking 3 to 5 years. It's going to be ambitious. The vision is the thing that takes us from the incremental to the audacious, right? So that's how we think about a vision.
I like that framing a lot. It takes us from the incremental to the audacious. And just to kind of clarify how you're defining these terms, you've kind of put your mission as your reason for being, kind of why you exist, your vision as what you're going to do or what problems you're going to solve in a set amount of time. You've talked about strategy as how, and a roadmap is kind of what in some ways for companies. But you've called out the vision being so critical because outside of it, your teams are going to go in different directions. It's kind of this North Star, or I kind of look at it as this mountaintop you're trying to get to. What are some of the common misconceptions people have about a vision?
There are so many. The first one is not having one, right? And in the absence of it, then, what do you get? You get these, this incremental desire to achieve normally profit or revenue. Now, I'm not saying we don't need that. We need that, right? We got to pay the salaries, we got to keep our shareholders happy. That's all good. However, most of us, not all of us, most of us need a little more. We need something to believe in. Now, en route to achieving that, of course, we got to make the revenue and we got to pay the salaries, right? But having a vision, it's inspiring. We want to be inspired, especially, let's be honest, especially product and tech folk, right? Whether we're right or not, we want to feel like we're leaving our dent on the universe, right? And maybe we're a little, I don't know, arrogant or something, but we do. And so if you want to inspire people, then a vision is one of the ways that we do that. But like I said, it's also a critical start of providing focus for the company. So not having one, then we're back to, incremental features and projects. In a lot of companies, I know that's true. But if you want to make a transition to the product model, you better be sure you start to think about vision. The other thing that I see a bunch is people getting, vision confused with mission, which we've already talked about. The other key issue is, vision getting confused with company vision, right? We can have some concept of what we want our company to be. Maybe we're going to talk a little bit about culture. We're going to showcase how the teams work. That's really done for PR reasons or corporate reasons to showcase to, I don't know, execs or to help recruit. And that's fine. It's not a product vision. A product vision it's a specific asset which really brings the mission to life and showcases what it is we are going to choose to do over 3 to 5 years that is going to make that mission a reality. And it's going to incorporate some things, some real choices that we make. And it's going to exclude a bunch of things. And that's purposeful too.
Okay, so I want to make sure I break this down well, because you kind of called out inspirational in nature, and many people talk about visions being emotional. Is that okay? Is that the real intent? I want to kind of say, you're saying it should be, or it should be inspirational, it should be emotional. If not, maybe you're missing an aspect of what makes it a vision.
If we're going to inspire our staff, right? If we are going to inspire 10,000 people or 5,000 people or, 20,000 people, then, as humans, we react. We react to emotional and it's really a story. It's a story of the future, right? And a good vision, and here's a good quote. I don't know who where this comes from, but a good vision will kind of pull us towards the future. So it's going to show us a direction. Sometimes I see companies and they look like, when you take a bunch of school kids for a walk and everyone's going everywhere and 3 people are running over there, another 5 kids, that's very different to like a crack military unit, which is all in line. They know what the destination is and they're en route. That's what a vision is going to do or should do.
Let's get down to working on a vision. First of all, who owns it? Whose job is it to create a product vision?
Well, first of all, I would argue that a vision, it just can never be a collective enterprise, at least in my experience. Now, that doesn't mean that we aren't all somehow involved, but it's filtered, and it's filtered through the leadership. It is really the role of the CPO, to own and ensure that they have a holistic company vision. Now, we are going to need some help with that. Of course, we are going to need input from some key folks around the organization, and every organization is different. You better make sure that you have some good input from your CTO or your VP of engineering. You better make sure you have some good input from your CFO, right? Or your CEO. The number one stakeholder, in my opinion, for a vision is the CEO. If you get it right, then they are going to be the stakeholder, frankly, that uses the vision more than anyone. They are going to be showcasing it at events. They are going to be showcasing it to future partners. or investment partners. They are going to be showcasing it in stand-up, saying, hey, remember this? This is what we should be talking about. This thing here. Why are we talking about this? It's this. So let's get back to the vision. Yes, that's a great idea, but it's not a part of our vision. Maybe later.
The responsibility for the vision is the most senior product leader, whether that's a CPO, CTO, head of product, VP of product, whoever that most senior product leader is responsible for creating a vision. Is it okay to have multiple visions? Is it, and if I have a multi-layered company with multiple CPOs or different business units, where does the vision sit? At what level? And how many is okay?
I like to think of it this way. The vision should be relevant to enough parts of the company until it makes no sense. So it needs to stretch across, for most companies, I mean, this is the entire company. Most companies will only require one singular, integrated, holistic product vision. Now, there are some exceptions to that, right? So for example, if you're an Amazon, you will have huge business units that are in essence, companies in their own right. So AWS would, of course, have its own product vision, right? The consumer side would have its own product vision. Alexa would have its own product vision, but that is not most companies, right? Single integrated product vision. The point of a North Star is that we can all see where we intend to go. Now, does that mean we are involved in the same work as we reach that goal? No. There is going to be some different work. We will have different ways of achieving that goal. But the point is, it's bringing us together. So do not make the mistake of everyone having their own product vision. You can see how even just using those words, the whole argument falls apart under its own weight, right? Then we're back to the school kids over the mountains. We're all going in 1,000 different ways. And I'm not saying there's any malice in that. Of course, those people are trying to make the best decisions they can in the absence of a vision. But the problem is those decisions are by nature localized. And we don't want localized. We want to bring people together and show them the destination and the route forward.
I like that. I tell teams all the time, if you've got 10 teams and 10 product visions, that is just chaos. The idea is that we are all going to the same place, even though we might have different responsibilities or roles in supporting that. Okay, let's break down a vision. I want to kind of know the ingredients of a great product vision. I'm putting together a vision. What are the things I need to look at and the inputs in order to create one?
I love the fact that you used the word recipe. It is a little like that, right? There are some critical things that we need when we make a good meal, right? 3 or 4 key ingredients. And then, we may scatter some things around this just to add a bit of extra zing, right? When it comes to a product vision, there are some things that are critical. The first one is it had better be focused on business and customer problems. And I mean validated business and customer problems. That is absolutely critical. The second one is it had better reflect the corporate strategy, right? If the C-suite or the exco have made some key decisions and this, is somehow ignoring those, then good luck. It is not going to be accepted by the board or the chair of the board or the CEO. So you have got to understand these major decisions and reflect those, right? The third thing is it should show us at least a glimpse of how we're going to make the revenue and the money, because people care about that stuff, right? Got to do those 3 things. Those, I would argue, are the 3 main core ingredients. Now, that is not enough. It needs to showcase some other things too. Back to that audacious point. If we're going to inspire people, then we need to show them how awesome this is going to be for customers, for the business. If we do this, is it going to be worth it? We also should be incorporating some other key things like what are the trends? What are the industry trends? How is this going to help us leapfrog, the competition? You spoke with Marty about AI. Wow. I mean, that is a huge kind of input now. And these ingredients, we add to a different level. Right now, we are at the birth of this really big new tech trend, Gen AI. So we better be sure that we're incorporating any thoughts about that because that's going to have an impact.
I mean, John, to that point, how do you ensure that your vision is grounded? You're saying you got to go where the trends are going. You got to go where the buck is going. You got to incorporate what's coming. But how do you ensure that it's also a little grounded in reality and not so aspirational? Like, if I have a vision that is outside the scope of what's possible in my company, have I lost the whole plot here? If it feels so unrealistic or unreachable for our organization?
There was a time, I don't know whether I should say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. When I was at Microsoft, which was not under the current leadership, right? Where we would all, once a year, it was something like once a year, right? Which was crazy anyway. And we would get this vision which came down from on high. Microsoft was not such a happy place when I was there. It was still, you remember that old diagram of everyone, shooting everyone else? It was still, I mean, that really did still exist, right? And we would grab a Diet Coke and we'd grab a chair and we'd sit in the room and we'd look at this video. And this video, I can still remember one video that had a flying car in it, right? And we sat there and we just laughed. It was, not only was the company, really not ready for something like that, the culture wasn't, there was funky stuff going on. And we just didn't believe it. And then we never saw it again. No one ever talked about it. It was it. It was like a moment in time. That is like, it is the worst example. And so, did it have an impact on, my team's work, my work, or our unit's work? No, not really, right? For all those reasons I've outlined. So it has to be audacious. That's why I use the word, audacious. It should be audacious, but not kind of so crazy for people to lose interest. Now, there would be some companies that would disagree with that, right? I'm sure, when SpaceX put their first vision out there, it was like, well, this is so far into the future. So it depends on the culture of the company. But for most companies, in the more common scenario, it's got to be stretched, but not so far as to be unbelievable.
I'm seeing this trend now where more and more of these tech companies are actually demanding longer term visions because the pace of innovation, the speed in which technology is evolving is much faster. So I'm seeing companies ask for 10-year visions, and even in light of like SpaceX saying we want to colonize Mars in some ways. And then you're thinking to yourself, okay, we got to first get human life to space, or working on some of those people that are trying to extend life or say we have a goal of curing death in the world. And they're like, that's a 50-year vision. In some, like they broke out this element. And maybe the time horizon is an important piece in this narrative. If you're saying, this is a 5-year vision and we want flying cars, then you kind of lose interest. Or if you're saying like, look, we are jumping ahead in the investments we're going to make. Is the idea here, Jon, that because there are two aspects I'm trying to straddle here with vision. One is what's possible, and the other is what's possible for us. It's kind of like it is the idea that vision is grounded in our capability to, because, it's possible in the world to do it, but can we as a company actually accomplish it? How do you strike that balance?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are different fidelities of vision. I spend, as you do too, a lot of your time now, a lot of my time working with companies that want to transform, right? So for a lot of those companies, it is a transformational vision. We are betting the revenues for the next 5 years of the company on making this happen. And for a lot of those companies, it is hugely ambitious, to move from a company where you've treated tech as a cost center, which has, been a project-based organization. You've funded tech in that way, all the way through to these empowered teams with strong, mature product management, strong, mature, software engineering, strong, mature product design, and all the, disciplines surrounding that. That is a major shift. So I actually think, in those examples, it's got to be stretchy, and it feels stretchy. And I can tell you, as you will know, in some of those companies, it feels slightly unbelievable. They've been operating like this for 50 years and suddenly the world is going to shift, right? So that is huge. Now, in other companies that I would argue are a little more mature from a, technology perspective, maybe it feels a little different. I don't know about that, 10-year comment that you made. For me, it's the opposite. If technology is changing so quickly, then okay, I don't think we're talking about 3 to 5 year, product vision anymore. Maybe it's 18 months. Like, how can you think 10 years out? I mean, it's impossible. I can't think 10 years out. And my guess is a CEO who doesn't understand technology is you're going to struggle even more. So now we're talking about, 18-month visions. And look, those companies that are towards the left of the curve, they have already instigated AI, into their visions, right? And they are talking about smaller durations. Maybe we're looking at our vision every 12 months and we're tweaking our vision every 12 months because things are shifting every 12 months suddenly feels like a long time. For the first time in my career, maybe since the birth of the internet, you know, Gen AI and AI in general is shifting things so much more quickly. So I don't know whether it's easy now to even think 3 to 5 years out. I'm not saying I have the answer to this, but I am trying to reflect what companies, are telling me. Superhuman's a good example. That's long been focused. That's the kind of, the email, awesome company. They've long been focused on speed and automation, and their vision has been focused on that. Now they've updated that, right? Now they're providing, their vision is all about providing AI powered communication quality. And that's happened pretty quickly. And it's changed their vision. So they've updated it. And the same is true at Adobe. They've been super quick. They've integrated AI into all of their various products. And, Firefly is another good example of how they've thought about things. And again, that shift has happened pretty quickly. That wasn't in their vision from 5 years ago, because it would not have been in their vision from 5 years ago. So they're starting to think about updating it much more rapidly than we think of in the past.
Now, Jon, you described your recipe for a vision, and you kind of called out, I want to see it focused on real customer outcomes, on business outcomes. I want to see it reflect the corporate strategy. I want it to have a glimpse of how we will make money and how we will succeed in here. I maybe want to change your framing and say, how would you test a vision? Like, if I gave you a vision, like, what do you look for as indications that it's a good vision? Like, how would you know it's a good vision?
So this is where, and maybe I'm going to say something controversial, but when I talked about, those ingredients, a strong sense of customer problems, we are making some choices there, right? We have got to choose which of those customer problems we are going to take on that speak to our mission, that allow us to make the revenue and the money. That's the first thing. A lot of companies, they have no clue. There's like 2,000 problems. Okay, that's normal. But which are the real key problems? Which are the problems that are really going to allow us to innovate, get our heads above the pulpit and really push forward and create this, significant market share impact and really engage with our customers, whether it's enterprise or consumer? That work has got to be done, right? So sometimes when I say I was going to say something controversial, it is possible, to, get a team of people to start to think about this stuff in like a, vision sprint. But I don't know that I could pull all of that information in a week. So if you are going to use that technique, which can be a good technique, you better make sure that you've got the ingredients up front, right? The other one is the corporate strategy. If our corporate team haven't made some bigger decisions, and we know that's happening in 3 months, is probably not the right time to start to think about a vision. We've got to get some of those answers involved, too, right? So we need to start to do some homework. That is really, really important. So when I think about, okay, what makes a good vision? The first thing is it's got to be grounded in problems, right? It's not just some, subjective view of the future. It's really, really grounded. When I was at Trainline, we did some important work when it came to the vision. We went very deep in all of the geographies that we cared about. And the reason we went deep with a smaller set of customers, because we needed to understand customer problems. No one had ever done that before. Then, we drew some conclusions from that. But who knows, were they right or were they wrong? So we wanted to find out. Then we went broad and we validated those conclusions, right? Now we had this real core set of problems. When the CFO asked me, hey, Jon, why that? I could say, look, I literally have quant. And I can prove to you that these are the real critical problems that our customers have.
I really like that. When I test visions, I always ask myself, I say, look, if I cannot answer the question, what problems are you going to solve? And who are you solving those problems for? You don't have a vision. If I cannot answer the question, how would you make customers' lives better? You don't have a vision. If I cannot see within it, to your point, a glimpse of like a reflection of who we are, our corporate strategy, and our sense of where we want to be, you don't have a vision. Now, John, let's face some realities with some companies or teams. If I am a product manager, for instance, I'm in the company and we don't have a vision. We don't, yeah, at least not what I can see or find, maybe give me the pitch. What do I say to my leadership about why I want a vision? How do I request one from them? And what happens if it doesn't exist? Does it really affect my work? Am I lost in the organization if I don't have a vision or a North Star of where we're going?
First thing I would say is don't panic, because I think that's a pretty normal situation, right? I would say this, have a viewpoint, right? And start to think about those customer problems that I mentioned. Maybe if you have a research team, some companies do, it's normally a small amount of very overworked people, but if they are the right people, they can be awesome, right? So start to think about the problem, start to introduce that, to your line manager. Maybe, go buy the Inspired book and leave it on their desk with a nice little note and a box of chocolates, right? And say, hey, I just want to draw your attention to chapter X. I can't remember which chapter it is, right? And also the Empowered book. And so we need to start to educate these companies in absence of any vision. And that's, I've done that so many times. I've even done it with CEOs. I've done it with VPs of product. You have to choose your moments, but don't give up. Ask the question, hey, where are we headed? It feels like I'm doing this over here and, Susan's doing that over there. And, are we really kind of headed in the same direction? Maybe it would be helpful if we started to think about a product vision. And, this is what a product vision is. And we've got some really good research. We've got the ingredients. I feel like, we just need to start cooking.
Yeah, I love that. I like that. We've got the ingredients. We need to start cooking. And, when I explain it to leaders all the time, I talk about what vision informs and the risk of it. I say, look, it's very hard for us to know where we make our investments in technology without the vision. Because, we're saying everything is possible. I kind of describe to leaders, I say, look, we were building a house, a 2-story duplex, and then sales went and sold 10 more floors. And we're like, okay, now we need to put some piping and wiring to support 10 floors. And then we came and announced the new skyscraper has been sold. And we're like, oh my goodness, the infrastructure, the architecture, the foundation will not support this. Now we need to replatform. And I say, imagine if we told everybody we were building a skyscraper. We would have made different choices. Maybe we know we will start with 2 floors and we'll have the infrastructure. And I tell them too, I say, look, if we are not choosing what spot to play, it's going to affect our team topology. We're going to be changing org structures every 5 months because we are reacting to threats and opportunities. Like, oh, we have a mobile team. Then we say, oh, we're not doing mobile anymore. But we're like, we've hired a mobile team. Now, what are we going to do? We need AI. And you staff up and you staff down. And so I kind of call out those risks to an organization. And I say, look, and I love your framing. It's kind of, we have the ingredients of understanding which problems are critical to us and what we kind of want our company to be. We need to guide our teams to work together. Now, I've always argued that it's not a vision if nobody knows about it. It's kind of like if it's a North Star, but we can see it, then, it's not doing what it's meant to do. So maybe talk about storytelling and how we communicate a vision. What are the ways we communicate that and really pass it on to people?
Someone mentioned to me this. This is where we need to be a little careful because, we at SVPG, we have a strong bias for the video medium, right? And so, it's justified, I think, because it is a story. If we are explaining or telling a story of the future, then emotion, I think, is helpful. And of course, the video medium is helpful in drawing us in, right? Now, sometimes I think folks just equate vision with a video. But for all the reasons we've just discussed, it is not. You can explain a vision, in multiple different ways. It could be a PRFAQ, it could be some kind of deck, it can be a video, it could be storyboards. That is your choice, right? It is the choice of the organization. Whichever way you do it, you had better be certain that it's got the ingredients that we're discussing, right? Not just some tagline. and a couple of storyboards that have been written by, that have been drawn by a good designer. It has got to be based in those real assets that we've already discussed. Now, when it comes to showcasing it, my personal opinion is the video is a great medium for it, right? It's not the only medium, but it is a good one, mainly because as CPO, when I'm standing up, being introduced by the CEO, explaining, the corporate strategy and what the CEO wants to do, then handing over to a CPO to introduce a vision, which is pretty normal. Those are big company all hands. And I've just described a transformational all hands. Those are those moments where companies can pivot. Then I want to make sure that my audience, jumps out of the chairs, with excitement, right? And video is, of course, a great way of doing that, but it's not the only way.
I like that. I mean, I've seen different things, press releases, articles, decks. I do coach teams all the time. I tell them you have to coach vision. While you present it on all hands or a presentation is not the best way to communicate the vision. It's the best way to show alignment. But you have to, for the reasons you just described, the most effective way of communicating a vision is a one-on-one. It's almost like nobody's going to raise their hand in an all hands and say, John, I don't understand this. This is not clear. And typically what I do is, I say, hey, remember we watched the video, we talked about it. But remember, the vision is meant to answer the question, do you understand what problems we're going to solve? Do you understand which customers we're going to serve? Do you understand why we picked these problems and how you participate in doing that? And I almost want to challenge teams. It's like a cascading thing. I say that to my direct reports. They should say that to their direct reports. And I test it by going to like an engineer on the floor and I say, hey, what's our vision? Some people have a vision statement that it's easy to remember and snappy. And I say, what does that mean? What does it really mean? And like I said, you describe the ingredients. If I cannot kind of taste the food and say, oh, there's some cinnamon in it and there's some paprika, like you've missed the mark of just kind of, we have a meal and you've checked the box as a vision. Now, John, have you ever seen a vision lead a company astray?
What I have seen a lot of is no vision, right? That is by far the bigger issue, is just not having a vision. I would say that describes, something like 80% of companies today, right? They have a mission and they have these yearly targets, right? And the only thing really that exists in the middle, and then that gets translated into projects. You will know this, Christian, because you deal with a lot of companies too.
Yes.
That is what happens, right? So that is by far the bigger issue for me, is a lack of vision.
Yeah. And it's people talk about what's an alternative to roadmaps. That's what our companies want. Our customers want roadmaps. Customers are addicted to roadmaps. Sales want roadmaps. And, you even have some executives, they're like, what do I finance or fund if not a roadmap of projects and futures? And I say, if I paint a picture of the world we want to create with a vision, I am now asking you to fund teams to solve that problem. I actually love visions now for customers because, in a rapidly changing world, a customer saying, oh, a short-term roadmap item of what I'm going to get next week versus I want to stay with this company because the world you're trying to create in the next 3 years, 5 years, I don't want to miss being a part of that. And I have found it that a really compelling product vision solves a lot of the challenges we've seen with reactive cultures, with customers being flaky about, and the demands or pressures that we see on teams for like dates, deliverables, projects, or output.
You mentioned talking about vision one-to-one. Love that. I don't know who said it, but you'll know this, someone only hears you once you've said something 100 times, that kind of thing, right? So yeah, look, we need to find every moment we can, to communicate the vision. But the thing that I was going to mention is, the product and technology teams can normally lean into a vision, right? They kind of grok it, they get it. What you want the CFO showcasing the vision to the finance teams, right? And being excited about it. You want the finance teams to be excited, about the vision. You want the marketing team excited. You want the operations team excited. You want the sales team excited. For me, that is the real true test of a strong vision. That everyone in the company, I remember, the moment where the CFO and the head of corporate affairs came up to me after I showed the vision for the first time. And I kid you not, the head of corporate affairs was jumping up and down excited. Maybe this is going to be an interesting 5 years, right? That's kind of what we're looking for.
Oh, I love that test. It's a unifier. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Stakeholders, participants in your organization feel excited about the product work. And I cannot understate it. All right, John, I want to hear if there are any product visions you admire. Like maybe give me some examples you've seen out there that are like, wow, that's a great product vision. It's compelling. Maybe it's public now that you can share.
The one I like that we do talk about is, what's happened at Kaiser, right? Over the past few years. And this is good because it helps to explain mission and vision, right? So Kaiser's mission is, quality, affordable healthcare, right? That's no great surprise for a big, company in the health industry. And it's a big company serving all the states in the US, for those who are listening who are non-US, right? It's a major, major health company across the US. But again, there's 1,000 different ways of doing that, right? And what they decided to do was they decided to transform to the product model, and they decided to really, really go hard at kind of telehealth, remote health, and they called it Get Care Now. That was the product vision. So how are they going to achieve this quality, affordable healthcare? Well, the focus for them was going to be a product vision all around telehealth. And they started that, just in time for the pandemic. And guess what? They produced some amazing solutions which spoke to the vision, spoke to the mission. And that's just a great story, right? That's a great story of, you could call it a legacy company. By legacy, I don't mean bad. I just mean pre-internet with a lot of complexity. And they decided, to invest in this product model, smart engineers, smart technologists, smart product managers, designers. And it was at that moment, you'll know the next phrase, right? Which we've heard, which is never let a crisis go to waste. That's another good example of that. You've got your own, I know, Christian, but that's a great example of that. And it's a good example that explains mission and vision.
I love that a lot. I was sharing one with John Deere, the tractor manufacturing company, putting a smart industrial farm forward vision of the farm of the future, where a farmer is with automation and running their farm remotely in some ways and using devices to do it. And we see it over and over again in some ways. John, this has been fantastic, breaking down vision, going deep into it. My last question here, I am a leader. I have never done a vision before. I'm a product leader. I now understand it's my responsibility. I understand the importance of a vision. I have never done it before, John. I am terrified. Where do I go get help? How do I get better? I cannot get better by avoiding it. Most people outsource it, maybe ask for help, but I want to get good at doing a product vision. What resources, guidance do you have for me?
I mean, you will know this. We would always recommend some coaching, right? That is going to be helpful. The first thing, though, is you've got to make sure you've got those ingredients. Go and think about what are the core customer problems from all areas of the organization. If we were going to get in a room and say, right, what are our 10 most egregious problems across the organization? What would they be? If you can't answer that question, you've got some work to do, right? Second one is, corporate strategy. Do you have it? Do you understand it? Right? And then the third one is, you've got to go find some coaching and some help to put one of these things together.
I love that. I love that. And there's homework you can do. I love that you're calling out the agency. Your product sense as a product leader is the key ingredient that makes a vision very compelling. You got to go get deep understanding of your customer, of your business, the dynamics, the trends, the industry, where your market is going to help you get a good product vision. Always a fantastic time talking with you, John. Thank you for being here with us on Product Therapy.
My pleasure.
Want to learn more? Until next time, please check out svpg.com, sign up for our newsletter that Matty Hagan puts out, join us for one of our workshops near you, and get access to all of the articles and content we put out. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Until next time, have a good day.
A quick disclaimer, while this podcast is named Product Therapy, it is not hosted by licensed therapists or mental health professionals, and it is in no way a substitute for professional mental health services. We recognize the importance of mental well-being and encourage anyone facing personal difficulties to seek support from qualified professionals. See www.findahelpline.com.